So, good morning, this is David, and I am finally producing the much fabled voiceover for job relations. I know that we went through many of these slides already, so I'm going to try to skip through the slides that we've gone through already fairly quickly and get on to the slides that we haven't done yet. So Happy New Year to everyone. Today is Friday the 3rd, and I am fully 1 week behind my master plan for trying to get this completed. So send my apologies to you, and hope you'll forgive me, and hope you have time to watch this before our class meeting this Thursday. So we've gone over the background for for job relations, the mutual trust and respect aspects of it, that supervisors have to earn it and give it, and without it that we lose our effectiveness as supervisors. We've also talked about the human and operations balance, that operationally a supervisor needs to know the job, and from the human's perspective they've got to actually care for their people because they know that success comes through their people, which is a critical part of job relations. We looked at the 5 conditions for the supervisors, and we've gotten through 2 of these so far, responsibility and work. We'll cover more deeply teaching, Kaizen, and leadership here shortly, but just to remind you, job responsibility, first of all, the supervisor has to know their job deeply. They have to be fully cognizant and deeply know the things that their people are doing. And so the responsibility and the authority that they have are really decided by company policy and standards. So they really need to understand the responsibility that they've been given. And in addition, they have to know their job really well. That's the work part of it. So if you don't know your job, then you can't direct the operations, and people can see through that fairly quickly. So these 2 things, job responsibility, understanding the responsibility and the authority which has been given to you by higher authority, and then secondly, knowing your job really well. So those are the 2 knowledge pieces, knowledge of responsibility and knowledge of work. And then we move on to the ability pieces, the 3 conditions that deal with ability. First, the ability to teach. No matter how many jobs you know really well, if you can't teach them to other people, then that knowledge can't be given to the people who are working for you. So they're not learning because you can't or won't or didn't teach. So you've got to be able to teach, and you need to add teaching to your skills, and you need to improve teaching as you think about the things that you need to improve. You also have the need to make the ability, you have to have the ability to make Kaizen. In other words, small incremental improvements. The highest knowledge of operating methods in the workplace has to come from the supervisor. If you're following along and you're reading in the Toyota Way Field Book, for example, and in Toyota Kata, both books indicate that the majority of the improvement that comes, the effect of the improvement, in other words, comes from the supervisor or the team leader making improvements on his or her own. So in other words, thinking about the work that needs to be done and thinking about how can I improve this? How can we make an improvement? Still trying to vet it through the team, but if you remember correctly, that diagram that I showed you in Toyota Kata, most of the improvement effect comes from the effect of the supervisor, the affect of the supervisor, working with his team to make improvement, or her team to make improvement. And the goal for Kaizen is the most efficient use of labor and machinery and materials, and that's what we're trying to do here. So all of those things, efficiency should remind you of productivity, which should remind you on your balanced scorecard of the service pillar. The third ability that we're aiming for here is leadership. And the whole goal of leadership is to make smooth relations between you and your workers and between the workers themselves. So in order to do that, you've got to make sure that problems are prevented before they flare up, both human and operational problems, because operational problems have a human effect. So when problems do occur, if you act on them while they're still small, then you'll have the ability to try to keep them contained. And that's why we have containment measures, all so that we can reduce the effect downstream to our customer, but also reduce the effect that problems have on our team. So smooth relationships. We said earlier that success comes through our people. And so the S, P, C, Q, and HD on that diagram are safety, quality, productivity, human development, and cost. In your balanced scorecard world, it would be people, quality, service, finance, and growth. But in order to attain the objectives that you set through the course of the year on those balanced scorecards, you have to realize that your success comes through your people. This is a key point. We also covered that people are complex, and so they're multidimensional. They aren't just their work and the work that they do or the relationships that they have at work. They have other relationships, they have other contexts that they're operating in, and that is what makes them who they are. So let's talk a minute about establishing good relationships. First of all, what do we like as human beings? Well, two things. We like feedback and we like real recognition. Under feedback, we need to know what the expectations are that people have of us. And we also need to hear in what ways we can improve so that we encourage the plan, do, check, act cycle. So we like feedback as human beings. We also like real recognition, credit where it's due. And what we're looking for here from a team leader's perspective or a coach's perspective is the extra or unusual performance. So when you apply the rule of 3 positives and 1 thing to improve, think about real recognition on the 3 positives. We don't need to tell people what we expect. That's feedback. So we don't want to tell them 3 things that you're doing that we expected. What we're aiming for are 3 things that are unusual or a little bit extra, things that we wouldn't have expected. But then whenever we give them the 1 thing to improve, we either reiterate what we expect or we point out ways that we can improve or that they can improve. Some other things we want to know. We want to know about change as human beings. So as we think about trying to establish good relationships, we need to focus on feedback and recognition. Those are 2 things. But we also need to focus on change. What's happening around us? Why is it happening? And how can we help our teams accept the change that's happening around them? We like valuable work. This is one of the premises for lean manufacturing and lean in healthcare and lean in service is that value-added work that makes value for the customer is exciting and it's fulfilling for us to do. So we need to make sure that we look around for people who are being underused and we want to try to not stand in the way of value-added work. So often you'll hear me say, let's not interrupt the value makers here. We want to be able to have a team leader, for example, jump onto a task that's being done so that the value-making worker could come off of that task and we can interact with them. So don't get in the way of value-added work because this is what's flowing to the customer and that is what pays the bills, including our salaries. And finally, we want good judgment and common sense. Now, this is debatable. All of us look around and we make judgments. We pass judgments on our supervisors or we pass judgments on the people that are working for us. And we say, gosh, I just wish they had a little bit more common sense. And what we're really saying is, gosh, I just really wish they would think exactly like me. I think what you have to seek here is some good common ground. So what is good judgment and what is good common sense in terms of the common ground here. Next we're going to move on to the type of people problems that we encounter. So we've talked about success coming through our people, the 5 conditions for supervisors. We've talked about trying to keep good relationships in the midst of all this. So what we need to also be aware of are the kinds of problems that are going to pop up in the human system and how we might address them. So let's look at some details here. These are things, the first category are problems that we are anticipating. So, for example, when work conditions are changed by company policy, mandatory overtime, shift changes, the census in the hospital is decreasing, and we know that there are going to be people who are going to be laid off for a period of time. Senior people who are forced to move from their physical space or from their position or organizational structure or the group changes. So, for example, you've got major shifting that has occurred over the past 6 months in SMG. And so what are those problems that we can anticipate, people problems that we can anticipate by the things that we're actively doing and that we actively know about, so we anticipate them. The second category are the problems that you can begin to sense. And this comes whenever you can, when you feel like employees are getting touchy or snippy or on edge. What's happening here is that mutual trust is beginning to deteriorate, and the atmosphere in the workplace is strained. We know about these things. We often talk about these things, but we often don't do anything about these things. So what we want to do is put these problem categories into a bucket and say, look, these are the kinds of problems that we're going to have in the human system, and we need to address them. So when we feel that somebody is getting snippy in the workplace, then we need to consider that a point of recognition for a problem. The next category, problems that are brought to you. In other words, somebody comes to you and says, look, I am just dissatisfied. I really do not like my job. Or someone asks for a transfer. Or they come to you and say, I just want to quit. I can't deal with this anymore. Obviously, that you've got a problem that may have gotten to an extreme position at this point. And then finally, the most extreme problems that actually blow up in your face. Somebody who actually says, no, I'm not going to do what you asked me to do, or they're continually showing up late, or you've got lots of unexcused absences. These are the kinds of things that we actually, in the current state of the organization, we often look at these blow-up-in-your-face problems as the kinds of human system problems that we have, without thinking about all of the things that lead up to the blow-up. In fact, in human resources, we often do things like exit interviews to find out, for example, why somebody leaves. And what we find is that if you think about these behaviors ahead of time, these actually are the kinds of things that you see in advance of somebody exiting the organization. They're dissatisfied, and from a lean standpoint, an operational excellence standpoint, our employees are our customers in a sense, and we want to make sure that our customers are satisfied. So all of our HR processes, including the leadership that we provide to our teams, is flowing value to those customers. And so these are the kinds of problems that we need to be addressing. Remember that a small flame can be extinguished with a few ounces of water. So what we're trying to do is nip these in the bud. So we're going to apply, of course, PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, to our people problems. So let's look at the diagram here, and then we're going to break the diagram apart. You can see that we have an objective in the middle. We're trying to get the facts, weigh and decide, take action, and then check our results. And you can see that we've got some warning signs around the outside. Be sure to have the whole story. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't pass the buck. And then, did you action aid the goal? And we'll describe what action aid the goal is. So first of all, we need to pick an objective. We're looking for a target condition here, folks. We need to pick a target and then the correct target. A temporary target lets you do 3 Gs and change the goal based on the situation. We experienced this as we went through the level 2 training, where the target condition is kind of fuzzy when you start. This is the background on the one-page report and the target condition that you're aiming for. But then as you do more and more problem solving and more of the analysis, the objective becomes clear. So you've got to pick the target and then pick a correct target condition. So as you go around the cycle here, as you get the facts, this objective, let me get my mouse up here, as we get the facts, this objective may change a little bit. As we weigh and decide, this objective may change a little bit. We just need to be comfortable with the idea of target condition, things that we know today, but we may need to learn more as we go on. We need to ask in the objective development, which point is causing the trouble? This is your point of cause. What's the effect on production or service or quality? And does this concern anyone else? So we're looking at trying to balance here the operational and the human. So where are we having the friction that's occurring? Then what's the effect on operations? Then what's the effect on the rest of the human system? So then we move to get the facts. We want to review the record. So if you're working on a small team, you pretty much know the person's history, their performance, their attendance, their attention, those kinds of things, the things that you've had to do with that person in the past. But if it's a large team, or if this gets to you, and say that you're at the vice president level or senior leadership level, you're going to want to review the record. You want to do this in an objective way. Remember, this is get the facts. So the best way to do that is go and see to get the facts. You might go and see the person at work. You may go and see the file instead of letting somebody interpret the file for you. We need to understand rules and plant customs here, and by plant what we mean is the physical location where the person works. In international companies, we need to understand the rules of society, and so we don't get into that a whole lot here at Signature, but in some of our clients that have global operations, there are certain cultural rules or acceptable behaviors as part of that society that may not be acceptable in other societies. So we want to make sure that we calibrate to the current culture that we're working in. And were the rules that are in place, were they followed by the people that were involved? This is really important because those rules that we put in place are typically there to protect people. And so when a rule is violated, then we need to know that, and we need to make sure that there are rules for violation of rules, if the cause and effect there. And the above is an important fact in the foundation of the action. So in other words, what we're doing here, what we're determining here is really important as we develop what are the facts that are involved. And note, we want to get the whole story here. That's our warning sign here. We want to get the whole story. We don't want to leave any rock unturned when it comes to getting the facts in people problems. Still on getting the facts, we want to talk with the individuals. The most important person is this person. Think about effective listening and think about how you are going to get to factual statements by using effective listening. Remember to listen and to seek opinions and feelings and put into effect all those effective listening tools that we've learned over the past couple of weeks. We want to get that whole story. To the extent that the facts are obtainable, then you can actually make a good action. So a judgment can only be made on the basis of what you know, and getting all the facts is the essence of dealing with people. I can tell you from my own personal experience in my family that I often rush to action based on a judgment that is not based on a foundation of good facts. And I'm sure that we do the same thing in our work situations as well. Second step is to weigh and decide. We need to take all the facts and fit them together. We need to look for gaps in the facts, and if we do have gaps, then we want to go back and try to fill those gaps. And we also want to look for contradictions, because where there are contradictions between two sets of facts, there is the possibility that there is actually a gap, and so we need to go find the truth. We want to consider their bearing on each other, how the facts fit together, and then also how do the facts weigh on each other, and what possible actions might there be. We want to look at practices and policies. So from a policy standpoint, we want to see the letter of the law. But from a practice standpoint, we also want to see what precedents and intentions have been given to us through the practices. Practices are important because if we have, through our practices, voided policies in terms of a policy being a possible action or a route that we can take, then we've made it void, and the policy cannot be enforced or put to use for the good. So, and finally, we want to consider both the human and the operational. What would the effect be on people and process? We want to make sure that we don't jump to a conclusion either. That's our warning sign down here. Considering all the factors above, basically on the last slide there, we want to make a decision for some good actions here. We're going to use common sense and good judgment, and remember, those are subjective things, and so you may want to get some counsel on this. That's why it's important that we understand that as a team leader, we are also team members on a team. So one incredibly valuable thing you can do when you have people problems is take the people problem to your team, where you're a team member, and vet that problem through the other team leaders that are on your team. And finally, then, don't jump to conclusions. This is slow down. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't race into judgment. Finally, we need to think about taking the action. We want to handle the situation ourselves. We want to make sure that we have the responsibility. Remember, we need to know what our responsibilities are as supervisors, and we need to also know what our authority is. But within our responsibility and authority, we want to handle the situation ourselves. We don't want to delegate an action that can be difficult for someone to understand or for someone to swallow. You may need to decide if you need help in solving the people problems or taking actions in people problems. You may need help from the sense of counsel, like we talked about in the previous slide, and you may also need help from the person that you're taking action with. And so you got to figure out a plausible and positive way to ask for that help. You may need help from specialists as well. So for example, if this is an HR action that you're taking, you may need some help from some HR professional to understand the nuances of policy or the nuances of practice. And then when you take those and put them into an action, you may want to bring that person with you just so that you have some help here. Remember, you're not delegating, you're handling the situation yourself, but you may want to make sure that you have the right kinds of people there to help. And you need to continue even if it's unpleasant. I just noticed here that these graphics are not correct. So we're on to the next set of graphics, take action and don't pass the buck. So back here, if you would imagine this green button is don't pass the buck, you got to handle the situation yourself. Moving on, we also need to decide whether we need to involve our supervisor. This goes along with the help portion of it. If you don't, then don't. Having two supervisors working with one person with a people problem can be overwhelming. So just make sure that you have the right authority and that you've got responsibility and you're working within those boundaries. You also need to determine whether the action should be reported, and you need to share your opinion of the situation to your higher authority, and you need to remember that personal actions should not cause that supervisor trouble. Think of your 5 circles, and as operational problems can bleed across the boundary between you and the team above you, personal or person problems, people problems, can also bleed across that boundary. And so you need to be sensitive to that, and that's what you need to carry across the boundary in terms of communication. Going back to this, should it be reported? I would say that in most situations, you would want to keep the team above you informed of what is going on for 2 reasons. One is as we continue to work at promulgating a culture in the organization. So in other words, most of the organization by number is still in the culture change phase. We want to have people have the opportunity to learn how to handle people problems. And so there's value in sharing those kinds of actions and situations. In addition to that, it's just good because it's difficult to know what might bleed across that boundary to the team above you. And so they have the ability to reject or to limit what you're sharing, and the team leader has the ability to come alongside of you and say, and to help you see where you can improve in terms of reporting what should be reported. So I would default to report almost everything and just go with it that way. Obviously, the exception to that would be where there are personal situations, and so you want to limit the amount of personal information that is being reported. Timing is important. The timing can be definitely drug out. That's probably the biggest thing that I've seen in my 30 plus years of leading teams, is that oftentimes the action is carried out well after the actual problem occurring, and when that happens, it communicates volumes to the organization. So it's important that, as we said in the Navy, it was swift and fair justice. So we need to make sure that we take action quickly, and that we plan for good timing. And another note on timing would be also look at what's going on in the rest of the organization. The classic is the downsizing that occurs on Christmas Eve. And so I've seen organizations do this where they let 30% of their organization go all on Christmas Eve, because they don't want to deal with the HR action the week after, the last week of December or the first week of January. So they just, boom, make it happen at the end of the year. And in doing so, they really communicate negatively to their organization. So watch the timing. And the last piece of this cycle is to check the results. PDCA, and now we're checking and we're acting here. Follow up as soon as there should be results. So in other words, plan for what are we going to check here. If it's a change in behavior, we can go and see the change in behavior. Change in attitude, we can go and see the change in attitude. These are not visual checks and controls necessarily, but they're definitely go and see. And we need to decide whether repeated checking is necessary, and it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. And the other thing we want to check is that the action actually served the company. Did we actually move closer towards achieving a balanced scorecard target by solving this people problem? We also want to watch for changes in output, attitude, and relationships. Let's look at all three of those. The output of the person and the people around that person. So by output, we're really talking about their service, their productivity. Are they back? Are they engaged? Are they locked back in here? Second, the attitude of the person and the people around them. Has the team gotten over the people problem that they've encountered here? Has the person gotten over it? And then lastly, the relationship between you and that person, if you're the supervisor, and you and the people around that person, and also the person and the people around them. So all of the relationships that are involved, can we see that there are positive results, and those positive results are leading to the attainment of balanced scorecard targets. We need to determine whether or not we have reached the objective, and if we didn't reach it, was it because we had missing facts? Did we have the wrong objective or target condition, or is it because we took the wrong action? And what we need to let prevail here is common sense and good judgment. So we can obviously cycle around. We can go back through the cycle again, reset the objective, get more facts, go back and weigh and make a decision about the action that we're going to take the action, and then check and see what happens here. So that is a pretty good break in the material there. I'm going to stop my recording here for a moment so that I can grab a glass of water, because as I've been teaching here, my throat has gotten dry. So I'm just going to pause the recording here for a moment and